Hello, my name is Jerry Fisher. Thanks so much for your interest in my book, Daily Pivots, Breaking Free from Habits That Hold You Back. I really do appreciate it. Now, at its core, Daily Pivots is all about the power of storytelling. Its power to inspire you and motivate you to do exactly what's needed right in a given moment. Now, when I was thinking about doing a video about storytelling, I thought, what better way to begin than by telling you a story? So the title of the story I'm about to share with you is The Abilene Paradox. And it was written by management consultant Jerry B. Harvey in the late 1980s. It was designed to provide leadership training for managers. Okay, so if you're ready, let's begin, and I'll tell you the story. All those years ago, on the July afternoon in Coleman, Texas, population 5,607, it was beastly hot. I mean, it read 104 degrees on the Walgreens Rexall X-Lax temperature gauge. Also, there was a wind blowing a fine West Texas topsoil throughout the house. But even so, it was tolerable and enjoyable even. I mean, we had the fan going on the back porch. We even had entertainment in the form of dominoes. And dominoes is the perfect activity for weather conditions like that. It doesn't take a lot of effort. All it takes is for somebody to mumble, shuffle them, and lining up the dots on the table where they belong. All in all, it had the makings of a fairly pleasant afternoon in Coleman. That is, until my father-in-law speaks up and says, "Hey, why don't we hop in the car and go have dinner at the cafeteria in Abilene?" I was startled to hear this because Abilene is 53 miles away from us, and there's a raging dust and heat storm going on out there. Not to mention that we would have to be driving in an unair-conditioned 1958 Buick. Ugh. But before I could speak up, my wife jumps in and says, "Hey, sounds like a good idea. I think I'd like to go. What about you, Jerry?" I was a little startled to hear her say that, and I thought, well, maybe I'm just feeling really differently about this than everybody else. All I could think to say was, "Sure, sounds good to me. I just hope that your mother wants to go, though." "Sure, I'd like to go," my mother-in-law chimes in, and she says, "It's been ages since I've been to Abilene." So, the four of us hop in the car, and off we go to Abilene. Unfortunately, all of my predictions came true. The heat was absolutely brutal. Ugh. And as we were driving there, we all got coated in this fine layer of dust cemented in by our own perspiration. Miserable. And then we arrive in Abilene and go to the cafeteria, and the food was a first-rate testimonial to antacid commercials. Awful. Ultimately, some 4 hours and 106 miles later, we all arrived back in Coleman, hot and exhausted, and we just throw ourselves in front of the fan and sit there in silence for a long time. Finally, just to be sociable and also to break the silence, I said, "Well, that was a good trip, wasn't it?" At first, no one spoke. I knew I was in trouble then. Well, the first one to break the silence at that point was my mother-in-law. So she jumps in and she said, "Well, I didn't really enjoy that. I would have much rather have stayed here. I only went to please the three of you. And besides, I wouldn't have gone if you all hadn't pressured me into it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So I spoke up and I said, "Hey, what do you mean y'all? Don't put me into that you all as if I was thrilled to do this. I only did it to please the three of you. I mean, you're the culprits." So my wife jumps in and says, "I don't appreciate being called a culprit. I mean, you and Mama and Daddy, you were the ones who wanted to go. I just went along to keep you company and to be sociable. I would have rather have stayed here." And then my father-in-law jumps in suddenly and starts off by saying, "Hell." Then he proceeds to tell us what was already obvious to everybody at that point. He says, "Well, I didn't want to go either. I mean, you two visit so seldom that I just wanted to make sure that you were having a good time. I would have much rather have stayed here, played dominoes, and eaten leftovers from the fridge." So after all the complaints had been aired, the four of us again sat in silence in front of the fan. And think about what just happened. Four intelligent, reasonable adults had all decided of their own choice to drive 106 miles through a God-forsaken desert, in furnace-like temperatures, through a cloud-like dust storm, to eat miserable food at a hole in the wall in Abilene, when none of us had wanted to go. I think more accurately, we could say we all ended up doing the opposite of what we really intended to do and what we really wanted to do. I mean, the whole situation simply didn't make sense. End of story. And I love the last line of that story. You know, the whole situation simply didn't make any sense. Or did it? Now, some of you might be thinking, well, cute story and everything, but why don't you just get right to the point? I mean, nobody likes to waste time, and it takes a little bit of time to tell a story, right? Well, remember what I said at the beginning of this video, that they used to use this story for leadership training for managers. So let me use a management example to try to illustrate to you the power of this story. So imagine that you're in a staff meeting and your manager decides to make a statement. And so she says, okay, now I want everybody to speak up and be honest. I want to make sure that we all don't end up doing something that none of us wanted to do in the first place. Yeah, I understand that, but it's not very powerful, not very memorable. Imagine instead that the entire staff had been through this training, and so they knew the story of Abilene. And so imagine now that the manager says, okay, before we finalize this decision, I just want to make sure we're not all hopping in the car and driving to Abilene. You know, I don't want to come back from this thing miserable with a mouthful of dust. Speak up now or forever hold your peace. Do you feel the difference? I mean, using a story is a lot more powerful than making a logical statement or lecturing. A story has the power to invoke a memory, make you smile, maybe nod in recognition, and touch you in your heart and your gut. Stories can inspire you, they can move you, and they can compel you into action, get you to move. Potentially, they're really powerful things. All right? So at this point, let's do an experiment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read some quotes to you, and the quotes come from movies, TV shows, books, songs, historical events. And I want you to pay attention and see if they create any kind of reaction inside of you. Now, it could be a smile on your face, it could be a memory, it could just be the flutter of any kind of emotion. And if it helps, place your hand on your chest, right in between your heart and your gut. And that might help you to be able to tell if something registers. Okay? So let's begin. And I'll read the quotes at this point. There's no crying in baseball. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Do or do not, there is no try. I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. I have a dream. Chasing windmills. Baby, we were born to run. Okay, that's enough with the quotes. Now, what you may have noticed is not every quote that I mentioned caused a reaction in you, and that's really normal. I mean, what moves one person might not move another. It's just my hope that at least one of my quotes sparked a memory or made you smile a little bit. That was the main point to the exercise. So let's say that the quote that actually created the biggest reaction in you was the chasing windmills reference from the Don Quixote story. And for those of you who aren't familiar, chasing windmills simply means don't attack an imaginary enemy. Don't waste your time getting all aggressive and attacking something that's not even there. That's all it means. So let's say that you were at a party and a friend of yours did something really trivial, really minor, but it really angered you. You're really frustrated. And imagine that your spouse came by and said, hey, don't chase that windmill. And you think, I totally know, I know what that means. I totally get it. I mean, stories have the ability to get you to shift perspective so that you can pivot away from what's upsetting you. In this case, you pivot away from being angry at your friend and possibly attacking him and move instead in the direction of forgiving him and just letting bygones be bygones. Stories have the ability to instantly change your perspective, give you a completely new emotional state, and open you up to new choices. And this is all just because you heard a personally meaningful story right at the right time, right when you really needed it. So it's my hope that at this point I've convinced you about the power of storytelling. Now what I'd like to do is to turn this all back around to my book. At its heart, Daily Pivots is about helping you to make major changes in your life. So examples of major changes would be finding a compatible spouse, transitioning your career, improving your health, maybe losing some weight, or getting better grades at school. Now you may have noticed that with a lot of projects like these, they can take a long time. Some can even take years. So it's only normal that on a given day during this long period of time, an unhelpful emotion or a bad habit can swoop in and knock you off course, preventing you from reaching the goal that's really important to you. So Daily Pivots is about finding just that right story, just at that right time, that can convince you and inspire you to do the right thing, to pivot instead toward the change you really want. Hearing that story can snap you out of automatic pilot and open you up to new choices, better choices. Part 1 of Daily Pivots provides some background information. So it discusses things like goal setting, habit formation, and motivation. Part 2 of the book provides 61 very short but powerful motivating stories that are organized into 14 different categories. And so here's how you use the book. Select the category in the book that matches the challenge that you're facing in a given day. So for example, categories in the book include things such as being patient, boosting your confidence, calming anxiety and fear, and relaxing about mistakes. So go to the category that matches your challenge and try a few of the stories until you find one that you really connect with, that really motivates you and inspires you. Then, the next time you're facing that same kind of challenge, use that story to get yourself back on track, to pivot toward the change that you really want. In that way, you become your own best storyteller. And over time, as you learn how to do this more and more, consistently keeping you on track, you'll be amazed at how great it feels and how much easier it will be to reach challenging goals. Now, if you're watching this video on the Daily Pivots website, the next section down on the web page includes a couple of examples of these stories. When the video is complete, go check them out and see what they're like. Now recently, a friend of mine reviewed my book, and she was so enthusiastic about what she read that she called me up on a Saturday night to tell me how she felt about it. And she said, you know, Jerry, when I talk to people who are working on these really challenging changes, they tend to think that you have to work really hard for a really long period of time to figure out what's going wrong and why things aren't moving quicker. And your book is about creating a shortcut. It's about cutting through all that so you can get unstuck right here, right now. Well, I absolutely agree with her. That's exactly what the book is about. That's the type of assistance I've been giving to my life and career coaching clients over the past 20 years in my private practice. And that's the kind of approach my book can help you to foster and use and make a very powerful presence in your life. Not only do I want you to become your own best storyteller, but I want you to become your own best life coach as well. That's my goal, and that's the power of Daily Pivots. So that concludes this video. We're now at the end. Once again, I appreciate the time you've taken to be here and to watch. Thank you very much. And enjoy the rest of the website and have a wonderful day. Take care.